I'm gonna start recording. Oh, J J is back. Good to see you, Buck. Good to see your little Zoom square. Um, Teresa, why don't you start with introducing yourself and give us a little background on why you're so rad. I keep telling people you're rad, but I want you to cheerlead for yourself for once. You're rad. Tell us why, and
Thank
then you
you.
can leap right into the SOPs and talk to us about what they are, why we want to use them, and how we do use them.
Great. Thanks. So I say that my path to food hubbing is lifelong. I grew up rurally and watched farmland be swallowed by subdivisions, and even in my child's body, I knew something was wrong. Um, Fast forwarding, I had a little bit of an underground grocery store in my garage for about 15 years, and it got so big that the city shut it down. It was all producers with cash boxes. It was pretty sweet. So that was my first food hub. And then I've worked lots of roadside stands and farmers markets for years. Once upon a time, I was on the OSU Small Farms team with Lauren. And in that role, I focused on helping producers scale for wholesale and food safety and marketing. From there, I went on to do some benevolent brokering to gain institutional and grocery sales for the producers I was trying to help scale. And in that benevolent brokering scenario, I really saw that aggregation could make a big difference. One truck, one invoice. Around that time, 2010, I would say, started hearing about this new concept called food hubs, and it seemed like the solution to me and many other people. And and pretty quickly, um, I guess in 2014, UVM, University of Vermont, started a food hub management certificate program. It was a very short-lived program. I participated that. It was a year-long program. It was really great. And during that time, I worked with Fry Family Farm to help them scale to having a food hub at their farm. And the UVM program coincided with another opportunity for me to do a bunch of traveling and visit a lot of food hubs. And so I saw what I'd heard. If you've seen one food hub, you've seen one food hub and noticed that there were so many different ways to do it. And back then, the Wallace Center was having an annual food hub conference, and I went to those in a few places and just really started looking for an opportunity that met my ideal of the things that I saw. And I got a job with Cape Valley Farm Shop in 2017 and moved to California. The Cape Valley, if you don't know it, is a really sweet, beautiful agricultural finger of the Central Valley with a lot of the OG farmers that worked with the NOP to develop the standards. And it was a food hub that was about 10 years old, had been through several pivots, but it was farmer owned and community and farmer owned, and it really resonated with my values. And so I decided to take a little trip to California and check it out. And I stayed at that position for 6 years. And at Cape Valley Farm Shop, that's where I was when the pandemic happened. So opportunity for more pivoting. I was the first GM they had ever had. And I really loved that community and that business and needed to come back to Oregon. So I've been back for a couple of years. And just to stick with Cape Valley Farm Shop for a second, I really saw that, transitioning to different business models meant that there had been a lot of shifts and turnover and changes. And without systems, it's really hard to navigate long-term viability. And so started looking into what are the systems that support a food hub. And that's where the SOP work came out of, Cape Valley Farm Shop, setting them up for them. And last year, working with Sydney, I had the opportunity to look at four of Oregon's food hubs to help them identify what their operational, marketing, and infrastructure gaps were. And that was Agricultural Connections, Good Groceries, Gorge Farmer Collective, and Lane County Bounty. So I did site visits with those hubs and wrote reports and made some recommendations that mostly focused on how they could have endurance, how they could stay operational and sustainable and have an impact on the state's food system. And I've seen, as you all know, both with my own feet on the ground at Cape Valley Farm Shop and visiting a lot of food hubs, that food hubs need to run extremely lean to operate profitably, and the time to document systems is really scarce. And I imagine that the mindset exists that systems would really be great to have on paper or digital, and it's really hard to get to them. So that is where I came into developing these standard operating procedures and resources and trainings for the food hubs for the Oregon Food Hub Network. I want to say that I welcome questions all along the way. There's a lot of material here, and interrupting me is a great idea, um, rather than waiting till the end. So there's a lot of common operational issues that occur across a spectrum of different food hub operations. I wrote these SOPs, trying to keep them really adaptable, and they are templates. I'm going to say something that folks have heard me say before. I'm not a giant proponent of templates. I think that they can be a crutch or I don't know, a loophole. I don't know. Like I think about all the food safety plan templates that exist where you can find and replace your farm name with your farm name. And I think that if you're not really ingesting the material, you're doing yourself, your business, your employees a disservice to not understand the material. So I just really want to stress that they're very adaptable. They're meant to be adapted, and they're a head start, but they, with the exception of just a few, they're not really ready to just find and replace with your food hub's name. Also, want to recognize that businesses go through stages of growth, and in my experience, food hubs are not always in a linear track. Sometimes you go from startup to break even, back to startup if you have a business model change or something. Startup, break even, growth, viability. We're seeking viability here, and I think that food hubs are part of, or I mean, I'm sorry, SOPs are part of a good foundation for building a viable business. So I am going to share some core concepts, and I'm going to share some of the templates. They will all be on the Oregon Community Food System Network website at some point. And yeah, I really want to encourage folks to adopt them to how they best work for you, and encourage the habit of SOP documentation in support of growing your businesses and reducing inefficiencies and errors. So what is an SOP? It's a written procedure that outlines how a task is done consistently. Yeah, there's lots of different ways to do the same thing, and different people can successfully complete a task differently from each other. Yet there is a place for consistency in food business. I think step-by-step instructions are really helpful. They're useful for you to use as training documents. They're useful on the HR side of things if you're having folks that you're having trouble with being compliant with the way you need things done. I would encourage anyone to be open to anyone suggesting that maybe there's another way to do it and have a meeting and revisit the SOP, talk about it. Like maybe there is a better way to do it than the way that it's been written. Um, so SOPs really need to emphasize clarity, repeatability, and again, they have a great value for training. So let's see. There's lots of different kinds of SOPs, and I'm going to show you a few. Um, and I guess I'm going to start attempting to share the screen here. Okay. All right. So this is a basic template, and it contains all the elements that we're going to talk about. So Food Hub SOPs tend to focus on operations and some logistics and HR and how you document the practices that are taking place and sometimes logistics. The objective is the purpose of the task. Why is the task being performed? The personnel reach is who the instructions apply to. The frequency is the frequency, how often the task must be completed. And then the materials are the things that are needed for the successful completion of the task. And monitoring and verification are the steps taken to ensure the task is carried out according to the instructions. And the corrective action is what happens if the procedure is not followed as written. And if it's ineffective, like I said, to accomplish the task, there should be a conversation to how to correct it. And then record keeping, there's a lot of record keeping. And some of the things that I'm going to share will seem non-applicable, yet I'm going to talk to you why I think they're a good thing to think about. So we're not going to pause on this slide too long because it's the most overwhelming of the SOPs I wrote for the network. And it is the SOP for how to write an SOP. And it's pretty important, I think, to understand the function, the why you're doing it, the how you do it, and again, just really SOPs that are written really clearly, like asking for help in proofreading to assure that it's easily understood. And then the things to go over, just creating a system for numbering your SOPs and filing your versions and how they get approved and how they get monitored is going to make all the SOPs you work on more successful. This is a table of contents of the SOPs that I have created. There could be plenty more, and I provided a couple examples that would be SOPs written to your producers. And there's a couple other documents I've created that are more towards producers and you bringing new producers on to your food hub. Um, okay, so let's see. I need to move something so I can see better. Okay, so this is a pretty basic SOP, cleaning surfaces. I'm not going to read through it or anything. I just want to show you an example. And then in the SOPs, they hyperlink to the other SOPs or logs that they correlate to. So this is how you do it. And then in the materials is listed the food contact surface sanitation log. That's the person that's done it will record that they've done it. And then lower in the record keeping, you'll want to document that you're training people on these SOPs. And there's a couple different ways you can do that. I created an employee training log. I've seen it used where the hard copy SOP file also has the employee training log. And I've also seen it where the HR folder, your personnel folder, would have the log for each person. It might make sense to do it both ways. My caution there is only documenting in one or the other and forgetting that there are two, but whatever system works for you. And then the retention for how long you should retain that log is also in the record keeping on the SOP, but it also will appear elsewhere. Suddenly I can't get to the next slide. Well, there we go. So there is the log that correlates with the food contact surface sanitation log. Doesn't have to look like this. It could look any way you want it. I designed the log so that they had header space or left-hand space for clipboards. Again, it links back to the SOP. Just to walk through the header on this one, because I didn't talk about it when I went down the different contents, all the SOPs will have when it's issued, who wrote it, when it was last revised, what facilities it covers, and a version number, and that's all in the SOP on writing SOPs. And just to speak a little bit to using them for training, they're really helpful. SOPs are really helpful to walk you through new staff orientation. They're also helpful when you need to delegate. Sometimes you don't have enough time to train folks. And then there are some SOPs that are really useful posted in the place where they're being used. Maybe not this one, but maybe, depends. And then I've seen them done like a photographic step-by-step SOPs. You can be as creative as you need to be, but that does help with delegation if the instructions are really clear and accessible. It reduces mistakes during turnover or when folks are tired or stressed out to have a map of how things are done. And also, yeah, they just improve efficiency and accountability. Accountability and efficiency are pretty important. So keeping your versions accessible, and I suggest that they're accessible both in print and digital. So keeping them in the cloud so your management staff has access to them, maybe everyone has access to them, but also there could be a binder somewhere with the pages in there so people can look stuff up when they need to. And then they become part of the rhythm of your Food Hub's work. They can be used for annual trainings or just occasional, like something's changed. We need to look at this again. They're living tools, and soliciting feedback is a great idea. So showing you now a couple more logs. Again, different ways to do it depending on your operation. There's a weekly temperature log here that has all the conditioned storage in said Food Hub, and a week collects for all 3 different storage conditions, and then it links to the SOP, which obviously it's not going to do on a clipboard, but links to the SOP that does share what the temperatures are. And often it's a good idea to post those temperatures too. And then there's logs available for the individual storage areas. Hand washing is a super simple one. So this is an SOP that Erin took a look at, and we made a couple changes based on her feedback. And getting rid of the AI generated Food Hub logo and putting your own in is a great idea. And then giving it a version number. It hasn't been revised yet. It's in its first version. And this is one that could be posted. I feel like hand washing is a pretty basic thing that we should all know how to do, but it's pretty important for food handling. And yeah, I really like to see people wash their hands a lot. And so sharing that one. In talking about how you post your SOPs, this is an example. The hand washing method is an example of an SOP that is visual, not written as much. There's a lot of information here, but still it's guiding you through. It's got all the information that is needed, the revision number, who's approved it, what the SOP number is, the dates, all that on there. That's a good way to post a hand washing SOP. I'm sure, all the humans are alike in this way. Once you've seen something, you've seen it a couple times, then you stop seeing it. It's been my practice to collect different hand wash signs and post them and change them up every once in a while. I got the Jesus one out of a church bathroom I was in last month. I'm pretty entertained by all the different ways people can be told to wash their hands, and I think that it helps people if you're entertaining them while they wash their hands. Okay, so the next couple SOPs I have on the screen, this one and the next one, are I want to talk a little bit about maybe I'll take a breath. Does anybody want to ask a question yet? Do not have the chat open.
There aren't any questions in the chat. Is anybody
Okay.
overwhelmed? Is anybody using SOPs already?
Oh,
I see a mix of yeah and a mix of this. So I think we're in the sweet spot, JC.
okay, cool. Um, so while hand washing and food contact surface and recording temperatures, those things are all pretty basic and obvious and um, don't need a lot of explanation as to why those are important to food hubs. The next couple um, at the scale of operations that I have seen in Oregon could seem unimportant, unnecessary, over the top. And I think that they're still valuable, and I'm going to tell you why. Um, Depending on how you are or are not participating in FSMA or other standards that institutional buyers might be interested in, some of these things could become important to your operation. And it's not a bad idea to get them in place before you need them in place. And so thinking about how you welcome people into your facility and how they are able to maybe do something unkind to the food. It's not a bad idea to talk about with your staff and to have a consciousness around. I noticed when I was visiting Agricultural Connections, they have their box pickup at their warehouse, their overhead doors up, and they put up a little pop market. Excuse me. And that market table blocks anyone from coming past where they want them in the building. Um, you're not expecting anything to go wrong, but something could go wrong. And so I think it's a good idea to have this in place. And I think the next slide is the visitor log. It's not um, it's not a ridiculous practice, regardless of what's required of you for selling into an institution, to have a visitor log, to have people sign in when they come and visit the food hub, and to have an escort with them while they're on the premises. So that is in the library of SOPs. This next one about recalls and product recovery is probably something that you're unlikely to experience or have to deal with. For the most part, we don't see recalls of produce coming off of small operations. Many of the food hubs in the network are also selling packaged goods or prepared foods or other things that could potentially have this recall. So this SOP is pretty detailed and yeah, could be overwhelming. However, as an example of a template that you would want to pay attention to, I think this is one of the ones that you really want to read through. And it's just good stuff to have in your mind and understand, and creating a recall team, whether that's just you or you and one other person, a recall coordinator, like knowing what you're going to do. If you have to do something, if you have to segregate product, whose responsibility is that? If you need to contact your buyers, whose responsibility is that? If you're going to have to interface with the media, who's going to be responsible for that? And then in some cases, you have to determine the hazard severity and report the incident. Um, so there's just a lot of information here that, while you may not ever have to put it into practice, is a pretty good idea to be acquainted with. I have created two document retention guidelines. One of them is in direct correlation with the SOPs and the SOP logs, and these are suggested retention times for those kinds of things. Paper doesn't take up a ton of space. You can scan things. It's not a bad idea to keep things around. And then the next one, these are documents that your food hub might have, and some of the recommended retention periods for those documents. I really hope someone has a question, or we're going to be, so free so soon.
There's a ton
Um,
going on about recalls. Not
oh,
questions
is
yet,
there?
but we've had a recall
No.
experience. Christy had a recall experience in the network.
I just have a comment, that's something that I learned about document retention and access. We just filed our first 990 long form, and our CPA provided a copy of the public documents that the public has access to. And she was very helpful in just clarifying, like, these the public has access to, these do not. And if you want to just create an SOP, so if someone asks you for those documents, you're not put right on the spot at that moment because you might be running your farm stand or something. And so we did. We just created a really simple, like, here's your document request form. It states what time we'll respond and provide those documents. And so that was just really helpful to, it's kind of comforting to know I have it. If someone walks in the door and says, you're supposed to have your IRS exemption form, available to me. We're ready. We can just say, we have that ready, and here's our request form. So
That's
just wanted
great.
to share
I
that with
love that. Yeah, I love that you use the word comfort, because it's hard to align comfort with a recall SOP. But yeah, that is what it's there for. Yeah. Christy, do you want to tell a story?
Sure. Um, yeah, so I just happened to check email one Saturday, and there was an email from Puget Sound Food Hub saying they were recalling this blue cheese made by Twin Sisters Creamery. And I think Twin Sisters was an imprint of their main name, which is Ferndale Farmstead. Or something like that, or I thought it was. And so anyway, I was like, oh, well, that doesn't affect me. I have the other blue cheese. And so I went about my business, and then I was in the garden or something. An hour later, I was like, well, they wouldn't have sent that to me if and so I went and looked at my cheese, and I was like, oh yeah, that is my cheese. So I had to go back. I have been taking this food safety course through the University of Idaho, thanks to OCFSN. And we had just talked about recalls, and so that was great timing. So I went back. They obviously didn't want the cheese back, so I threw away the cheese that I still had, and then went back through my sales records to find who had bought the cheese that was recalled. And looked at the numbers in the recall, and the number on my cheese was not in the recall. So I got in touch with them and asked them about that, and they said, well, preponderance of caution or whatever. And so I emailed all the people that I had sold the cheese to, told them the full thing so that they knew there was a recall, but also they knew that their cheese hadn't been in the recall, so they weren't panicking. Not to downplay the recall at all, and gave them a full refund. Most of them had bought it a month or more prior, and so they had already eaten the cheese and not died, so that was good. But yeah, it was definitely a wake up call, like, oh, this is grown up food hub stuff here. And nobody was mad about it, and everyone appreciated getting a refund, even though they had already eaten the cheese. So that was about the extent of my experience.
Trace, you are muted. Christy, would you do anything different since you've gone through that recall? Is there something you would do differently now? Anything different
Um,
with your record keeping or communication or planning?
that's a good question. Let's see, I'm trying to think of how it could have gone poorly. I mean, first of all, somebody had gotten sick, of course. I do have a liability insurance policy in case they got really ornery about it. Just I don't do any sales. Like all the sales I do is through my online platform, and so I was able to see who had ordered that cheese. If I had had it at, say, my Fill Your Pantry event where people are just buying stuff, then I wouldn't have known who to get in touch with. And then I would have, gosh, I mean, we barely have a newspaper these days. I don't even know how I would probably put it on social media if it was sort of a general call. Like I could pinpoint who had the cheese. So I didn't have to do any kind of public anything. Um, and I think Puget Sound didn't either. Yeah, so I guess if you are in a situation where you cannot trace who has the product, you would just have to do more of a APB general announcement. It's the only thing I can think of at the moment. It was pretty streamlined once I realized that I actually had the product and was not in denial that I was part of the problem. And then they gave me a full refund also. I did lose a little bit of money on, transaction fees because people used a credit card to buy it. I gave them a full refund. And then Puget gave me a refund on the wholesale cost, but not the retail. So I did lose a little money on it.
Thanks, Christy. Anyone else want to share a recall experience?
Guess that points out though, like it doesn't matter what size you are, you need to be prepared for that recall.
Yeah, yeah. And I would say, Hannah, in your example, um, I, I can imagine that maybe there could have been an SOP written about the Best Buy dates being on the products. Maybe it would have slipped past anyway. And I want to go back to your comment, Sydney. Thanks for putting all those examples of things beyond throwing nails in the road for the logging truck that could happen. Leaving the walk-in door open, spilling on the floor. Yeah, all those things, little things can go wrong if folks are unescorted. Um, Anybody else have anything to contribute to the SOP conversation? Lauren and Sydney, thanks for decoding the acronyms. Sorry about that. Oh my gosh.
I have some questions,
Um,
Trace. If you're
okay.
if you're wrapping up the
I want
present,
them.
are you wrapping up the presentation part, or I can wait to the end if you're.
Well, I was just debating putting on the checklists, like the onboarding checklist. I didn't put them in a slide, but I'm sure I could
Mhm.
figure out how to get them on the screen or just talk about them. But please ask questions.
So I think so. This library of SOPs templates that Trace has put together, based on her experience and her workings with, some of the food hubs here in Oregon, is extensive. It's like 34 things, I think. I think there's 34 items that are being transferred over, which I could imagine could either A, feel overwhelming if you're just starting out, or B, feel like, what does this have to do with me? Which ones are the most important? So I think, Tracy, I would ask you if yes, they are all important. And if there were some that you're like, for the love of all that is holy, just get this one right. Are there, two or three or four or five that you're like, these are the ones, start here and build from there that you would recommend?
Well, one approach could be as you're onboarding new people and you're training them, or when you know you have your next succession of new employees, you could think about what the things are that are important, the SOPs that would really help you in training. And that might be one way to chip away at them. I think I know it's super basic, but I really feel strongly about hand washing and personal hygiene. Um, you know, my wellness, my medicine cabinet is hand washing and drinking water. Um, and I really think stressing hand washing, it can start to it can be at the beginning it can feel foolish. You're like telling someone how to wash their hands and you feel kind of like an asshole telling someone how to wash their hands, but it's pretty dang important. So I would start with hand washing. I think the food contact surface cleaning is important. I think getting into a rhythm with cleaning your walk-in and your conditioned storage spaces. So the conditioned storage usage and maintenance, I think it's pretty important that you have pallets on the ground or something to keep things off the ground, that you have a rotation planned. I think recording temperatures is important. I mean, I've seen some pretty dirty delivery trucks. Um, I think keeping everything clean is really important. Yeah.
I think a fair place to start is thinking about your food safety. Like you have a duty to the public that you're serving, that you're selling these products to, and a duty to the farmers to sell food that is safe to eat. And I think if you're overwhelmed by the sheer volume of SOPs, you don't have to adopt all of them, but you might want to start with, what are the things that could kill somebody if I do it poorly? Well, food safety violations can in fact kill people, and they do all the time.
Yeah.
Even, yes, not washing your hands.
Yeah. So I didn't put it on a slide, but there is a food safety plan resource guide that was written for the farmers. So there's a new producer pre-onboarding checklist. So that's if you're going to hear from a producer that would like to participate in the operations of the food hub, selling through the hub, and then if you have a farm in mind that you would like to bring on, it's some questions that you can ask to find alignment in your business types and your practices. And then one of the questions on that new producer pre-onboarding checklist is, do you have a food safety plan? If a producer says no, it doesn't mean you don't want to work with them. It means you want to help them understand why it's important. And so that food safety plan resource guide has a lot of resources, and I also linked not just things to read, but things to listen to, knowing that farmers often ingest information through their ears while they're doing other things. Um, and so your taking a look at those resources is also going to be helpful to your food hub. So I'm just sharing that resource exists because, yeah, keeping everything clean is really important. And your food safety plan does talk about separating allergens. Just glancing at the chat.
I have a question if there isn't any others.
Go.
Go for it, Carrie.
So I wonder what some of the other food hubs do as well. Is there a standard expectation that's shared with producers as to what they bring their produce in, the containers themselves? And because we get a variety of everything from pristine and sanitized to clearly reused week after week after week and barely
Yeah.
holding itself together. And we're taking produce from lots of different farms and putting them in one refrigerated. So we keep them all separate in sanitized containers. But I'm just wondering, like, if there is a standard expectation of how it comes to the food hub. What is that standard for the container that it comes in?
So there is a little bit of that in the receiving template, and you could go to whatever depth you wanted to. At Cape Valley Farm Shop, we did have packaging specifications. The egg packaging SOP that is included is a little bit from of that. Um, but yeah, it's a tough spot, right? You want to meet them where they're at and you want their produce. And you also have, like at Cape Valley Farm Shop, palletizing could be like, we were building pallets to take into San Francisco that were the maximum height we could get on the truck, and we needed to fill all those pallet spaces. But you've got egg cases and flats of, whatever, persimmons and metric cases and non-metric cases. It can be a real challenge to build a secure, safe pallet because it's got to in that scenario it had to endure several hours on the road and drivers responding to other drivers. Pallets spill. We were selling 5-gallon stackers of olive oil and honey and a lot of eggs, and like those are not fun cleanups. So you really do want to help your producers understand your challenge. Your challenge is to deliver what they put their, heart and soul into producing safely to the buyer. And some of the challenges include packaging. Wax boxes that no longer have functional tabs are not acceptable. And writing clear guidelines for your producers is really going to help you. And so there is a little bit of that in there, but again, you'd want to build it out to your specifications.
I
Did
want
that
to
help, Carrie?
back Tracy up on that response. I think ultimately you need to look at your food hub and build out your SOPs to, at least your minimum viability of like, we can accept a box that looks like this. It has to be this, in your receiving SOP, haha. It has to be this quality. You have to have fresh wax paper if you're reusing a wax box. A lot of hubs do accept reused wax boxes. But if you're moving into, and you're not in this market, but for those of you that will be looking to tackle ever larger markets, at some point you're going to have to identify who is your producer and who is capable of producing for you to your spec, to your standard. A lot of you at a place where you're actively there to work with producers who are making their way into a wholesale market like yours. So you'll set your standard, and then it's on them to build that SOP for their farm. And then it's on you and your hub to work together to bring people into compliance. And there's often resistance, especially around wax boxes because they're expensive. And you still have to hold that line and continue to work with them on this is what an acceptable product is. Just like you can't accept a product that's too dirty. You're not going to accept a product that has too much dirt on it. Like that's not a good product for you to resell. And these are conversations you just have to have.
Any other comments, questions? Open up the chat again.
I'm looking for, I finally am going to have time after this week to look at everything, so I'm so excited.
Yeah,
Thanks
I'm
for doing
really
this.
looking forward to more feedback, even though my time with this material is drawing to a close. The feedback would still be valuable to me.
Do people have questions on how to use the resource library or how to update templates or change them, shift them to the needs within their own hubs. Trace, apparently you are really good and really clear. There's zero questions.
That or no one wants to talk about it.
Or
I
everybody's like,
mean,
I don't want SOPs.
or do we want to talk about specific procedures rather than the act of having a document about it? I mean, that's kind of what Carrie was getting into. Or is that not in the purview of this particular meeting?
No, we can absolutely have
Oh,
that
no, we have time.
conversation.
I'm sorry, Sydney, say that again.
It's absolutely open for discussion in this meeting, Christy. Are there
Okay.
procedures you have questions about?
Well, again, I'm in this class through Idaho, and the one class that it's a series and they're all interesting, but the one I was the most interested in was the one I had to skip to drive to the coast for the conference. So, and that was the cleaning whole lesson. And so I have not watched it yet. These classes are 3 to 4 hours, so I haven't had 3 to 4 hour block that I've been able to carve out for that yet. But I would love to hear what other people, um, just sort of what your SOPs look like as far as how often do you clean surfaces? How do you clean? I guess one big question is how do you clean, for example, the floor in the walk-in when it's 34 degrees in there, short of, you know, taking everything out and turning it off and warming it up and whatnot. We'll just start there.
I can
Does
share.
anyone want to share their hub's experience with that?
Yeah, well, I will say that sealing the floor in the walk-in made a huge difference in making it easier to clean. We didn't have it sealed to begin with, and it is now.
Is it
And
concrete, Carrie?
yeah,
Okay. I have a steel floor, but okay.
okay. Um, yeah, so just sealing it made it easier to clean. We also have all of our shelving is on casters. So we can roll everything out fairly easily. And then we don't hold a lot for a long period either. So after we receive deliveries on Monday, we pack on Tuesday and we deliver on Wednesday. It doesn't have a lot in it Thursday through Sunday. So that's when we would do that deeper cleaning. So that's going to be a different schedule for everyone. But having the mobile shelving is huge. We don't have to lift and move as much. And we don't have shelving scraping the floor or any of that. And we can get underneath it. We have air gaps already between the bottom shelf and the floor. So we can get a mop under there, even leaving them in there. So that's it for us.
Trace, do you have any tips for that? I think it's kind of funny.
And
I've worked in a million restaurants, and my thing was I worked in commercial kitchens that were big enough that we could actually move into another walk-in because we would have, five or six different walk-ins and close one down to do a thorough clean. So I don't actually have an answer for an active walk-in. So I'm sorry, I'm coming up short, Christy.
yeah, I think it does vary based on operation. Like Carrie mentioned, when you're predominantly selling harvest to order, you have lulls where your storages are empty, whether it's just 1 day a week. And then there's your opportunity. But yeah, that's where the casters and putting things on pallets so you can use pallet jacks to empty the walk-in real quick and give it because you should wash down the walls at least annually, but maybe more often depending on how active your use of that space is. What you're highlighting, Christy, is how the SOPs will be different for everyone. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, so you also have to clean the refrigeration units. It's super important because they harbor listeria and other bacteria because they're the really damp part of the refrigeration. So I would say if you had a twice a year deep clean and then some kind of a program where you go in and wipe the floors and the walls, I really like the idea of having racks on wheels. So if nothing else, you could put half the stuff on one room, clean that side, and then move everything to the other half and clean it there that way.
Yeah, we would schedule maintenance at Cape Bay Valley Farm Shop, have the guy who was our reefer unit guy come and do that. Take apart the unit, clean all the filters, clean the fan blades, give it a real deep clean. And that usually happened in the winter when there was a little bit of a break because it's nice to let all that get good and dry, let it air dry.
When all of these SOPs are based on the CGMPs, which are current good manufacturing practices, and they're really basic things that people need to do, like hand washing. And Tracy's done a great job of outlining, and I didn't get to see all the documents, but I'm sure you have procedures for each item. But if one of the things that worked in a team that I was on a long time ago is we had this enormous sign printed that was hanging on the wall in the lunchroom that had a list of every CGMP that we trained everyone on, just sort of as a visual reminder. Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to change my apron after I go to lunch. Oh, yeah, I need to wash my hands every time I pick something up off the floor. Just a simple list up on the wall can be a really helpful reminder for people.
True. And also again, it's human nature to stop seeing the things that are right in front of you, like a sign on the wall that tells you to put your apron in the laundry after you dropped it on the floor. That's where training and retraining can be really helpful. And I know it's a demand on your time, and your time is so valuable, and there's not enough of it. Um, I really believe that the creating the SOPs, keeping them relevant and up to date, seeking input so that you can update them, is really well worth your time.
Is anyone doing farm visits or needing some help with an SOP for how they choose to onboard or not onboard a new farm? Is that a struggle that anyone's having? So Tracy did develop a farm visit SOP, and I feel like that one, if people in this room are interested, that one is a little bit more complex and maybe worth talking through a little bit, the purpose and what you're really trying to understand and do.
That's
Yeah.
something I had always wanted to do, but just haven't had the staff or time to do it, to really vet the producers before they come on boards because we're having all the contact with the customer. We want to make sure we're speaking truthfully about the practices
Mhm.
that are happening on the farm and everyone's assumption of, yeah, we're growing organic. If they're not certified, that perception versus reality there's a lot of leeway in there.
Christy, you're just getting produce.
I have a new farmer who's so adorable and is giving me, she has one teeny tiny greenhouse in her yard. And right now she's committed to 2 bags of arugula a week, one bag of bok choy, 2 bags of spinach, and 2 bags of kale.
That's micro enterprise. Trace, what do you think? Does sound like there were a couple questions on that.
I'm working on sharing these two things that I didn't put in the slides.
And I think it's okay oh, that you got it. If you're having a struggle, I think it'd be okay to just talk through the underpinnings of it.
Oh, yeah, no doubt I'm struggling with Zoom, but I think I'm okay, doing okay right now. So this is meant to be an internal document. So it's written not, yeah, just for an internal document. These are questions that you might want to ask, and these are the answers you hope to hear and why. And that's the way that this one was written. Um, And I think some of the things that you just mentioned, Carrie, are here. The importance of cold chain. This is the pre-onboarding. Like this could be a phone call. This is not the farm site visit. I can put up the farm site visit too. And let's see if there are any other questions. Here's the food safety question I mentioned. And then there's the resource you can share. I dated all the links so that they will expire. They will do weird things eventually. And I'm hoping this is useful. And then let me share the farm site checklist. Again, let me see. Did it change documents for you? Checklist? Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. So again, this is talking to you. This is things for you to think about when you go visit the farm. And again, these are things that you're going to look for. And you can ask questions about these things, of course, but really there's so much going on in a farm visit. It's social, it's a new experience, a new place. You've got a lot of curiosities. This is designed to help you put the thoughts in your mind in advance that you really want to look at. So here's a visitor log sign in. They might not have that, but if they have it, it indicates to you that there's some awareness that that is a regulation somewhere, and it might be a good idea. It's just a same reason you would have that. It's just really helpful to know that people are paying attention to things. You're going to want to look at hand washing availability and worker hygiene. It's just giving you some, and when I have used this myself, it's on a clipboard. I'm taking notes, and I don't, it feels a little bit awkward maybe, but it doesn't need to be. And you can say something to try to help everybody understand that, like, your clipboard doesn't mean you work for the feds or you came from the health department. It just means you care about your best practices at the food hub, and you care about everything that's going into the product that this producer is growing and packing for you, and you want to do your best job. I think just being upfront about the fact that you're taking care. And then there are on this one as well some proposed questions and the answer you're hoping for and why. So I'm hoping that this will be helpful for folks. And again, there is a food safety resource too. Let's see if I can put that. Is that now on the guide? I mean, on the screen for you? Resource guide, writing a basic food safety plan. So this is hyperlinking a lot of online resources. Again, templates have their downfalls, but there they are. There's lots of them. And then there's some videos and some audio references. And then UC Davis has an incredible wealth of post-harvest fact sheets that are really great to help those are also useful in conveying your standards to producers beyond packaging, what your produce quality standards are. And that's going to be very subjective, like you're not really wanting to ask these small farms to sort and grade in a way that they would have to if they were selling into a larger commercial market. But you still want, I think the cold chain is so important to stress. So there's that. Hopefully it was helpful to get a look at those things, and they'll also be in the folder.
I'm just
I'm
curious how
looking at the
many
chat.
food hubs do a on-farm visit? And is it limited to diversified vegetables or fruit, or Tracy, do you go to all of them? I mean, we have like bakeries and beef and added value and orchards. We have it all.
I'm gonna say that when I got to Cape Valley Farm Shop, aggregation for 40 producers in the valley, um, I was, and it's a pretty small place. I don't know, a few miles wide by, 25 miles north to south. I was pretty surprised to hear that there wasn't farm visits happening. I think it's a small community and there's a lot of trust. I think that in marketing, your producers should want you to come to the farm. They should want you to know their operations and be able to talk about what they're doing and what the level, I want to say level of integrity, but of course you wouldn't market by levels of integrity. But I think it's a good idea to visit the producers, a really good idea. I would encourage people to find the time.
I would add to that
Anybody else have
the
any?
yeah, I would add that the ones that are doing things right want you to see their operation. They're proud of it and they want you to see it. And so it's even just asking to have a tour, just their reaction to that can be telling.
Yeah.
Carrie, several of the hubs are doing at least some visits. I don't know anyone in our particular network who is insisting on a visit to every single one of their vendors before they onboard them. There's some combination of trust and relationship, on a case by case basis in which people are making their decisions. I think yeah, Christy, yours are casual. I know Agricultural Connections does some, but a lot of their farms they've been with for a really long time. I believe Gorge Farmer Collective does them because they're farmer owned and operated. Um, but I think in an ideal world, you would want to see all of those production facilities. You would want to see all of those farms so that you can do things like understand, are these filthy bathroom people? Because, filthy bathroom people may not be good hand wash people, which may then be a food safety liability, which maybe means you don't want to, carry their product.
Or like, are there dogs running all over everywhere? Are there cats on the counters in the packing house? Yeah, there's lots of sort of environmental hazards that they might not even realize that you notice, and you wouldn't notice unless you were there.
I think it's an
Yeah, it
ideal
can.
to work towards. So you've definitely named capacity as an issue, and
Mhm.
I don't think anybody here is saying you're doing it wrong by not doing it. But I think as you start, settling into a more mature hub and you start having more mature operations, you start building in more and more of those ideal activities.
And I think when you're in your food hub or on your farm and you're improvising to meet the demands on your limited lean capacity, you improvise sometimes in ways that you can't even see the fault in. You can't even see that you just provided perfect nesting space for birds above your wash and pack when you built that little shed roof over your wash and pack so you could get through the rainy season. It's really hard to see everything when it's right in front of you. So it is nice to have another set of eyes. I've been working with an operation that I asked them. I saw the facility and saw an opportunity for a camera to be put somewhere up high, and I asked them to put a camera and videotape their receiving because they were asking me to help them know how they can survive scaling in the constraints they have in their current facility. And you can see all kinds of things on a video camera that you can't see even though they're right in front of you. Just the different perspective is really helpful. Any other things anyone wants to put some discussion into?
Is this thing that Sarah posted, is that like the next thing on the docket, or are we going to talk about that? This good
We don't
manufacturing.
have it specifically on our docket, but
Okay.
we certainly can dig into more of this. And I will download it and add it to our resource files too, so that we can find it easily again. And Sarah, thanks for posting that. I meant to respond to that. Somebody thanked you for it, but I meant to add my thanks to it too.
Yeah, it's just a zine. It might be a different way of communicating with people using the kitchen that you could always use as a resource.
Other questions in this group? Who's overwhelmed with SOPs? No one.
They're just maps. They're so helpful.
Who said that? Sorry, I lost track of who was talking. Oh, was that Tracy?
I did.
Oh, your camera has like just a little bit of lag, so your words come out before your mouth moves.
I will say, if you are overwhelmed with SOPs, I provided kind of like an outline, just a format. It's just formatting. And I had my employees do the first draft, like write down what you do from your start of your shift to the end of your shift. What are like the routine things you do on Mondays? What do you do on Tuesday? And then that became like our template to start with, so that if they were absent or left their position, we had like, here's the routine. And then you start to build like, okay, what happens, when you have to use the kitchen? You start with hand sanitation.
Mhm.
And when you mop the floor, here's all the steps to mop the floor. So it was a good place to start. And it
It's
has
a great
become,
place to start. Yeah, then you have buy-in, you have engagement. It's great.
Mhm. Lindsay, you're right. The SOPs could, in fact, be endless. I think um, the thing to think of when you're thinking about an SOP is like, what's the critical path? Like, what's critical about making sure that we get this right every time? And some things, some tasks, they can happen a number of different ways as long as the outcome is the same. And some tasks, it's so critical that you get it exactly right that you need to document exactly what it takes to get it right.
Lindsay, I'd love to see that. I've written one of those too.
Yeah, that's a great message, Sydney. Thanks.
Carrie.
all right. I was wondering if anyone has an SOP for food that is brought to you that is gleaned. So it's not from a producer you've vetted or part of your normal process, but people are starting to bring us food. And I'm just wondering if we should handle it differently because we don't have the traceability. We don't have the transparency in how it was grown. And yet there's such a desperate need for food right now. I just wondered if there was somebody else had a policy.
Yes, I would just make sure that it's clear to whoever is getting it, whether that's in writing or verbally, that that's how it was
Yeah, and what gleaned
required.
means. So I'd have the definition of gleaned, have kind of a statement. It would be a similar statement that I'd give for, the garden produce that we grow and donate. Like I just let people know, hey, rinse the produce in English and Spanish, rinse the produce before you utilize it because we don't wash it ahead of time. Like we follow like food safety procedures as much as we can, where we wear gloves to make sure if kids are harvesting as part of the school classes, they wash their hands beforehand so that no allergens like are being transferred. But I agree with Christy.
Sarah Cross, I'm wondering if you work with a lot of organizations that accept gleaning. Do you know how they think about it? Or if you don't know, do you mind asking them?
Yeah, I'd love to. I appreciate the question. So, and this conversation, this is amazing and timely. So, thank you so much. And I'll get back to you on that question.
Good. Thanks for letting me like call you out of nowhere. It's like Sarah's on this call. She knows lots of folks. We would love to help. So we might get some answers for you, Carrie. Thanks for asking the question. It's a good one. Other questions?
Hey, Christy, I wanted to ask Christy a question. Have you ever asked the other hubs that you're buying from if they visit their farmers?
No, I mean, I assume they do because it's Puget Sound and it's Walla Walla Food Hub. And they know, I mean, I don't talk directly to Puget very often, unless there's an issue. But I do talk to Chandler quite a bit, and Chandler knows his farmers. And so I feel like I can trust his process, but I've never asked him. Yeah.
I think it would be a reasonable question to ask them how they bring on new producers.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, just to take notes on how I might do that in the future. Because they're definitely further along in the food hub journey than I am.
Yeah, we've all learned a lot through each other over the years. I remember at that, I guess I'm going to just admit, like in the early stages of having crush on this business model, Food Hub, I was so like enamored with this concept. And then it was very few years later that there was all this, like the UVM program only lasted, I think, 3, maybe 4 years. There was all this, food hubs that's not actually viable or workable. And unless you have $1 million in sales, you won't even break even. And then it created this opportunity to look at why did the hubs that failed fail and how can we learn from that? And I think that, the networks have really been supportive to that learning.
Yeah, I
Trace,
agree.
Carrie's asking about the UVM
Oh, sorry,
program.
Carrie, University of Vermont. University of Vermont.
They ran a
Yeah.
food hub training, Carrie, several years. I was going to say a few years ago, but I think it's actually several years ago now that Trace went to, Kiara Kashuba went through, and I think there's maybe one other person in our network that were lucky enough to go through it, and then it was gone. I didn't go through it. I wish I'd had the opportunity, but it was gone by the time I started doing any food hub work.
Yeah. And well, to Tracy's point too, I think because I remember learning about that program, and then also the Wallace Center was doing all the feasibility studies, and sort of the common assumption was that if you weren't within an hour of a major metropolitan area, you wouldn't be able to have a food hub. That was another sort of baseline marker, and I think all of us in Oregon are just too stubborn to listen to um, that kind of advice. Is how
We're all outlaw food hubbers.
Exactly.
Well, I think, part of it was at that time, there was also a lot of energy around saying, this is what a food hub is, and this is what a food hub does. And
Right.
we are choosing to not take those definitions and put ourselves in those boxes. We're choosing to think about how we want to move local food around, and that those models look really different in different parts of the state.
Yeah. So those of us who are old enough will understand when I say that we're the bad news bearers of the food hub industry.
Definitely old enough. Thank you for that, Christy. Do we have any other questions? We've got, about 10 more minutes left on this call if we want to use it. So if there's questions that we want to have, or if you all want to get 10 minutes back in your life, the choice is yours.
Well, I just want to thank Tracy again because I had so much work and coming out to the food hubs and everything, and Sydney for supporting her, and everybody for being the badasses that we are.
We are the bad news bears.
Those of you who don't know, go look that up.
There's probably a few on this call that don't know, but I bet a lot do.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone. Tracy, thanks for putting that together. I have to move them into the public files, which sounds super easy, but there's always some fight between the originating person's drive and files, and then mine, and then the public files. So I will get them there. I may not get them there before Thanksgiving, so it might be next week. And when I do, I will make sure to send the links out. Sound good? See y'all
Thanks,
next time.
everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Trace.
Thank you.